Prophet Daniel was the fourth of the so-called larger prophets. Nothing is known about your life beyond what is reported in a book that brings its name in the Old Testament. Daniel was an Israeli of noble and royal lineage, brought captive from Judah to Babylon by the Abuko kingdom of the Nasor. This happened in approximately 605 BC, in the third year of Joachim's reign, king of Judah. In Babylon, along with other companions with qualities similar to him, Daniel was educated for service in the Babylonian Empire, being instructed over language and civilization of. Among Daniel's companions in Babylon, the biblical account highlights three names: Ananias, Mishael, and Azarias, also known for their Babylonian names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, respectively. According to the Babylonian custom, which attributed names that made references to their deities, Daniel also received another name, in the case Belshazzar. The king of Babylon determined that the young people captured the same delicacies that were served in the royal banquets of the pagan court. But Daniel proposed in his heart not to contaminate himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, or the wine he drank. This seems to indicate that possibly the real food was conflicting with the food rules established in the law of Moses. Then Daniel talked to the heads of the eunuchs so that he didn't have to eat that banquet. Initially, an agreement was made so that for 10 days was served to Daniel and his three friends only vegetables and water. At the end of the 10 days, they would be examined and compared to the other young people who were banking the palace delicacies. After 10 days, Daniel, Ananias, Mishael, and Azarias were looking healthier than any other young man in Babylon. The Bible says that God has granted these four young knowledge and intelligence in all letters and wisdom. But Daniel, God also gave understanding in every vision and dream. When the training period determined by Nebuchadnezzar ended, the young people were led to the presence of the king. At the time, the Bible says that no other young people were found as capable as Daniel, Ananias, Mishael, and Azarias. This made them watch directly before the king. Nebuchadnezzar asked them several questions about all the subjects in which knowledge and wisdom were required. And Daniel and his three friends were 10 times wiser than all the charming wizards of the Babylonian Empire. Initially, the prophet Daniel gained a reputation by interpreting the dreams of King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had had a dream that made him disturbed, and he summoned the wizards, charming wizards and astrologers, asking them to reveal not only the meaning of the dream, but the very content of the dream. However, they were not able to reveal the dream to the king, which made Nebuchadnezzar command that all the sages of Babylon be executed, including Daniel and his friends. Upon learning of this, Daniel asked him to reveal to the king the content of the dream and his interpretation. Then, through divine revelation, Daniel told the dream not revealed by the king, as well as his interpretation, which included the destruction of the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. Impressed with what happened, Nebuchadnezzar honored God and rewarded Daniel with precious gifts, placing him as the governor of the entire province of Babylon, as well as the main boss of all sages. Later, King Nebuchadnezzar had another dream of God again. Such a dream involved the process of humiliation to which the monarch would be subjected due to his pride and superb. After these things, for at least 20 years, nothing was recorded about Daniel. Some scholars believe that he has somewhat lost some privileged position in court after Nebuchadnezzar's death. The prophet only appears on the scene again on the occasion of an episode occurred during the reign of Belshazzar, who exercised the correction of Babylon with his father Nabalino. Belshazzar gave a party and eventually ordered them to bring the gold and silver cups that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the Jerusalem temple to be desecrated by him and his guests. But at one point, human hand fingers appeared that began writing on the palace wall. When none of the sages of Babylon could unravel what had been written on the wall, the mother queen, probably daughter of Nebuchadnezzar and mother of Belshazzar, remembered Daniel, who was eventually summoned to play the inscription. She said, Men tekel parsam. According to the interpretation of the prophet Daniel, the mysterious inscription of the wall was a reference to the sentence about the conquest of Babylon and the fall of his kingdom. The exact interpretation given by the prophet Daniel was as follows. It all happened according to the interpretation of the prophet Daniel. Dario Amendo killed Belshazzar and conquered Babylon that same night. When Dari took Babylon, he soon recognized the ability of the prophet Daniel. Dario separated 120 province governors and also chose 3 men to act as supervisors of the governors, who Daniel was among the 3 supervisors. Prophet Daniel, however, began to stand out among the supervisors, and the king planned to put him at the head of the government of the whole empire. Given this, the governors and the other supervisors began to try to overthrow Daniel from their post, since they found nothing that could accuse Daniel. So they plotted a conspiracy that violated God's law and put Daniel in a dead end. The plan consisted of making the king a decree that for 30 days all prayers should be directed to the person of the king, and who disobeyed would be taken into the pit of the lions. Daniel was not shaken by such a decree. On the contrary, as usual, the prophet he prayed 3 times a day in his room upstairs, where the windows gave to Jerusalem. As part of the conspiracy, listening to the prophet's disobedience, Dario was very saddened and tried to save Daniel until the end of the day. However, the men who plotted against the prophet Daniel tried to ensure that the decree be fulfilled, and Daniel was thrown into the lion's grave. On the day Daniel was thrown into the lion's pit, the king went home and failed to sleep at night. When the day dawned, the king got up quickly and ran to the lion's grave. Distressed, Daryl called for the prophet Daniel near the pit. Hearing the king's call, Daniel replied by saying that God had sent his angel to close the lion's mouth. The king was very happy and ordered them to take the prophet Daniel out of the pit. On the other hand, Darius ordered those who rose against Daniel were thrown together with their lion's grave families. Finally, the king also edited a decree for everyone to fear and revere the God of Daniel. Chapters 7 and 12 of his book are recorded the very visions of the prophet Daniel, who, among other things, predict mainly the triumph of the Messianic kingdom. Prophet Daniel had his last vision recorded in his book on the banks of the Tigris River during the 3rd year of the reign of Syria. In the New Testament, Jesus, in his eschatological sermon, cites the prophecy of the prophet Daniel about the abominable desolation, which historically referred to the desecration promoted by Antiochus IV Epiphanes, and prefigured the desecration caused by the Roman general Titus in the fall of Jerusalem in 70 BC. Still on this prophecy, most scholars agree that such events somehow typify the eschatological Antichrist that will emerge near the end of the present age. We can summarize the life of Daniel the next form. He was a righteous and fair person, fear of God above anything. He never accepted himself to corrupt himself, however much he was the treasure that offered him. Daniel was faithful to God, even if it cost his life. Daniel's story also teaches us that it is possible to seek God even in a strange land and plunged into paganism. Probably the prophet Daniel reached 90 years old, living up to approximately 536 BC, and there